With economic stature in tatters after World War II, Poland was on the brink of crashing. Now, almost a century later, it's primed to become the next Germany. Previously a free market economy with agricultural richness, was doomed to economic despair after the initiation of communist rule in the 1940s. Fast forward to the 21st century, and we're witnessing an economic boost that is off the charts. What transpired this miraculous change? The war is not only chaotic on the battlefield when lives are lost, but the chaos seeps through the bloodbath and towards the times of peace. For Poland, it was the beginning of another war, the economic salvation. The war had exacted a heavy toll on the nation, leading to immense loss of life, widespread destruction, and the displacement of millions. The Yalta Conference of 1945, which divided Europe into spheres of influence, placed Poland in the Soviet orbit. With Poland in tatters, it found itself under the communist rule. Once the land of fields filled with agricultural richness was left with grey, decaying buildings, and a sense of economic despair characterized the landscape. The communist regime introduced a planned economy, which stifled innovation and left the nation with low expectations and a challenging way of life. It continued for another decade, and in came the 1970s. In an otherwise disco era, the Polish economy further deteriorated to an unimaginable level. Growth was hampered by outdated industrial infrastructure, government subsidies that concealed inefficiencies in production, and artificially high wages that needed to align with productivity. By the late 1980s, these issues had precipitated an economic crisis, characterized by a ballooning government deficit and hyperinflation. At this time, you might wonder, how did Poland gather itself? In sports, we talk about comebacks and change-defining moments. Like Michael Jordan's famous slam dunk in 1987, Poland was desperate for a miracle. And post-communist era is when the recovery began. But let's stay within a reasonable distance. In the immediate post-communist era, Poland found itself at a crossroads. The planned economy, a hallmark of the communist regime, had left the nation with an antiquated industrial infrastructure, inefficiency masked by government subsidies, and high wages relative to productivity. These lingering issues had created economic stagnation and instability. The need for change was clear, but the path forward needed to be clarified. And just like a patient who's in VFib, it needed a shock treatment, or in other words, a shock therapy. The founder of shock therapy, Leszek Balcerowski's vision was revolutionary. He recognized that Poland's transition to a market-orientated economy required a bold and unconventional approach. Its objectives were twofold, i.e. to control rampant hyperinflation and expedite Poland's shift towards a market economy. Balcerowski's plan was akin to a defibrillator for Poland's ailing economy, a shock to the system to jumpstart the transformation. The key components of this plan comprised heavy decisions. We mentioned that Poland is in a war after the World War. Due to this plan, Poland lost the battle but was able to win the war, as we'll see in the latter half of the video. Step 1. Wage freeze. The plan included the freezing of wages, a necessary measure to curb hyperinflation and realign salaries with economic reality. This decision was a tough pill for many, but it was a fundamental step in stabilizing the economy. Step 2. Price deregulation. Another vital aspect of the plan was the removal of price controls. This move allowed market forces to determine prices, fostering competition and efficiency in various industries. Step 3. Subsidy phase-out. State-owned enterprises had long relied on government subsidies to stay afloat, often perpetuating inefficiency. The Balcerowski's plan gradually phased out these subsidies, compelling these entities to operate more independently and competitively. And Step 4. Promotion of private enterprise. The plan paved the way for large-scale private enterprise, promoting the growth of a private sector that would drive economic innovation and development. The Balcerowski's plan marked the beginning of a transformative journey for Poland. It was a testament to the country's ability to embrace change and adapt to new economic realities. In 1999, Poland joined NATO on March 12th. The Polish government claims that since ascension to NATO, the Polish armed forces have become a catalyst of change. Something to ponder, isn't it? Poland's history is uniquely marred by bloodshed, making the nation exceptionally sensitive to external threats. Recent provocative statements by Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, have only heightened this sensitivity. Not to mention that the war on Ukraine also added an unwanted struggle for the Polish government to take their economic development to the next level. However, it turned out, like in any other sporting arena, the game is never won when the odds are with you. The fun is when you beat these odds and come out on top. These geopolitical circumstances didn't hinder Poland's struggle to be at the top amongst its neighbours. But the level of composure shown by Poland during almost a century of unrest made this country a giant in the European Union. A stray missile landed in a Polish border town last week, killing 2 people.
The war in Ukraine, reports of at least 2 dead tonight in Poland from a missile not far from the Ukrainian border. Ukraine tonight saying it was Russia.
Some European leaders worried as much about how Poland's right-wing government would react as they did about the possibility that Russia had ordered the strike. Poland's long-standing distrust of all things Russian and the current government's deep antipathy toward Moscow triggered concern from Brussels to Berlin that Warsaw might do something rash. Instead of losing its nerve, however, Warsaw was stoical, placing its armed forces on alert while keeping its powder dry until there was clarity about what happened. The conclusion is that it was an air defense missile fired by Ukraine to protect itself from a Russian attack that went astray. That's just one thing that they've done since Russia attacked Ukraine. Poland has been a constant supporter of Ukraine, which has further increased its visibility on the global scale.
The interest of its agricultural sector. The source of the problem is Russia's deliberate destruction of the traditional sales channel for Ukrainian grain.
They've consistently shown that you can't win battles by aligning yourself with powerhouses like Russia or the US. You need to be strong and independent without any assistance to make an impact. To some extent, it's poetic how Poland has made itself among powerhouses. Unfortunately, that's not where the story ends. Amidst such challenging geopolitical circumstances, Poland has undertaken a massive rearmament program, underscoring its determination to safeguard its sovereignty and strategic interests. Notably, Poland recently finalised a £1.9 billion deal for British CAMS air defence missiles, adding to its growing arsenal. With a defence budget of $30 billion, constituting 4.25% of its GDP, the highest proportion within NATO, Poland's rearmament is nothing short of a fervent spending spree that will substantially reshape the balance of power in Europe. When discussing balance of power, it can get cloudy, especially in Europe. Each country belonging to the extended Europe is excelling in one way or another. Russia is already a superpower. Sweden is already a technological hub, and we all know what the UK is capable of. But hardly anybody didn't write off Poland. In 1989, Polish workers had a GDP per capita of just a tenth of their German counterparts. 3 decades of steady growth has wrought a miracle. The economic disparities have narrowed dramatically. Adjusted for purchasing parity, GDP per head in Poland is now £28,000, compared with £35,000 in the UK, £34,200 in France, and £39,800 in Germany. At its current trajectory rate, Poland will overtake the UK by 2030. Since the millennium, Poland's real GDP per capita has more than doubled. By contrast, GDP per capita in Britain, France, and Germany grew between 15% and 24% over the same period. Further, Poland's rearmament efforts encompass a range of acquisitions that underscore the nation's commitment to defense. From procuring 250 American M1A2 Abrams tanks to 500 HIMARS systems and 96 Apache attack helicopters, Poland is on track to possess Europe's most formidable land army by the end of the decade. This transformation is significant, harkening back to Poland's historical role as a great power. The strategic rationale behind this surge in military acquisitions is multifaceted. Russia's performance in the ongoing Ukraine conflict, while not overwhelmingly successful, has demonstrated its capacity to prolong the war for an extended period. This prolonged conflict would inevitably lead to significant logistical challenges for the West, depleting the available material for Ukraine. In response, Poland's military leadership remains resolute, leaving no room for complacency. General Raymond Andrzejczyk, the chief of the Polish General Staff, emphasized the urgency of their efforts, noting that they have the financial means to secure essential weaponry. The answer to the question is that they're already doing it. Even though they're facing inflation like any other country post-pandemic, the cost of living is cheaper than that of Paris, London, and Berlin. Imagine having an inflation rate of 15%. double the average of the EU, but the people are happier there. For instance, rental prices in Wrocław are approximately 1/5 of those in London, and a pint of beer at a local bar won't set you back much more than £1. Perhaps economists or historians of the far future won't look at the figures at a cellular level, but on a larger scale, they are thriving. Poles had to work an average of 1,830 hours a year, more than Americans, British, French, and even Germans. Finally, the hard work is reaping rewards. Yes, its counterparts still consider Poland a poor country, but at this rate, they'll be at the top. Another point to ponder is that its military strength has gone from, well, strength to strength, evolving from its post-communist roots into a formidable force that commands respect not only domestically, but on an international stage as well. Today, Poland's military boasts a strength of approximately 150,000 personnel, with a notable addition of 30,000 troops in a territorial defense force established in 2017.
Always ready, always close. This is the motto of the Territorial Defense Forces, the youngest branch of the Polish military, with over...
These territorial troops, often dubbed weekend soldiers, complete 16 days of training, followed by refresher courses, a concept initially met with skepticism. However, Ukraine's successful use of mobile militias armed with anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles has turned this idea into a sensible strategy. And they're not even confined to holding on to investments to bolster their defenses. Notable deals include a £4.9 billion agreement with the US for 250 Abrams tanks and the acquisition of US F-16s. In 2020, Poland signed a $4.6 billion deal for 32 F-35 fighters, marking a significant stride in its Air Force capabilities.
Poland signed a $4.6 billion deal with the United States on Friday for the purchase of 32 of its advanced F-35 fighter jets to enhance air defense on...
A substantial portion of its recent military expenditures has been directed towards Korea, with agreements spanning tanks, aircraft, and other arms. Notably, Poland has ordered approximately $10 billion to $12 billion worth of weaponry from Korea, and the future promises a continuous supply of military hardware. There are no upsets in real life, only perseverance and determination. Poland's political and economic struggles seem like they happened centuries ago. Alas, this is the making of a true nation. They did the hard yards and at times found themselves on the wrong end of negative remarks, but persevered, showcasing how much they've evolved since the turbulent post-World War era. However, Goal 2030 is still a long way to go. Yes, Poland is on the right track, but only time will tell whether they can be a powerhouse or stay a dark horse.